Hi, I'm Steve Stedman, and welcome to this short video on Database Health Monitor and Analyzing I/O. With what you learn in this lesson, you'll be able to go and find which databases are using up the most I/O out of your disk systems, as well as what times of the day are the biggest I/O issues, or even what days of the week might have the most I/O related issues. Now, I'm here at the server overview panel for one of my test servers here. We have a couple of reports. One of them is in the instance report here, the I/O by database. If we click on that report, we can see, and of course this is my test database, so it's not really very accurate compared to what a real production database would be. But we have DB Health History showing a lot of I/O, the Quick Scan Archive, Quick Scan History, TempDB, Boat History, and Distribution are the top I/O databases, and then things below that are pretty low. But these are based off of a percentage. I'm going to use the backspace key here and jump over to the I/O by drive. And here we can see that the C drive has a majority of the I/O and the E drive has very little I/O by comparison. Of course, this is my test server, so I don't have all the proper like data log, tempdb, and drives like that set up. So everything's really hitting the C drive in this case. Okay, so now the question comes that we know from this chart that the C drive has most of the I/O, and we know from this chart that DB Health History and Quick Scan Archive and Quick Scan History are taking up a fair amount of I/O. But how do we know like what's going on a daily basis with that? So let's take a look here. What I've got on the left side in the tree view under this SQL Server name, we're going to expand the database health history and expand historic. And under that, there's an I/O by hour report. This was one that was added recently. So you always want to make sure that you're keeping up to date on your database health monitor updates. If you're not seeing this report here, it might be that you're a little bit out of date. But as long as you have Database Health Monitor version 996 or newer, you should be able to see this report. So we're going to click on Database Health History, Historic I/O by Hour. We can see that the columns are the days, the rows are the hours, and we can see that day by day, this database has a lot of I/O going. I mean, a lot, it's all relative, but for this little test server, it's a lot compared to the others. And we can see that on busy times, we're getting about 3.1 megabit per second, and on slow times, we're getting about 2.0 to 2.5 megabit per second. Part of the reason for this is a test database, and it's got a whole lot of test data being processed in there, and more than just what database health history would normally be doing. If we go and look at like our email marketing database here, and we look at the I/O by hour, we can see that this one has very light I/O. We can see that it's about 0.01 megabit per second, and on slow times a few zeros, but then the high points are 0.6 megabit per second. Keep in mind that it's a heat map here and color coded based from like white and blue up to red, where red doesn't mean it's an issue. It just means that those are the points with the highest I/O over time, and the white or the blue are the points with the lowest I/O over time, and kind of the yellows and the greens are in the middle there between going from low to high. Take a look at another one here, Quick Scan History, I/O by hour. We can see that this database, this is interesting in that we can see bands going across it, where every day at 1 a.m. or in the 1 a.m. hour, it's a much higher load than other hours of the night. And then we see again at the 1 p.m. hour, there's a higher load. So this would be indicative of a job that's maybe running every 12 hours to do some type of work specifically, and would want to go in and try and track that down. If you're using network attached storage, or even if it's just regular old hard drives on a server, I mean, one of the bigger bottlenecks that you run into with SQL Server is oftentimes I/O. And when you have a lot of load going on, or maybe you don't have enough memory, your drives get slammed over time, and this will help you figure out like where the problem areas are. And sometimes, I mean, let's just pretend that this 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. slot was not 2.6 megabytes or 3.1 megabytes per second, and it was much higher than that, and that was causing a problem. Well, we could use this to track down what's going on at those times, and then figure out, are there jobs that need to be moved around? A lot of the times what we see here is that people will schedule backups and CheckDB and index rebuilding and statistics maintenance and other warehousing jobs and all that kind of stuff in the middle of the night. And you end up with sometimes like an hour or two where the server just can't keep up with I/O depending on the configuration. This will help show those times and will give you a good way to help distribute that out over time. So really 3 different places we're looking here for I/O to figure out what's going on. We have the I/O by database, we have the I/O by drive, and then we have the I/O by hour underneath each of the specific databases under the historic monitoring. To use this I/O by hour, you have to have the historic monitoring turned on. As long as you have historic monitoring with these bar charts showing up with historic weights at the top, then you should be recording that. As long as you're on Database Health Monitor version 996 or newer, you should have that I/O by hour report showing up. This is one of those things that came from working with specific customers where we were running into some I/O issues during the night, and these type of reports were built specifically to help track down and find those problem areas. This wraps up a quick demo on some ways to do I/O related reporting using Database Health Monitor. All right, I'm Steve Stedman. Have a great day.